2022 was a very weird year. I started college that year, started making YouTube videos that no one watches, watched more anime than I have in the past couple of years, and did something I never thought I would do. I started reading manga. Oh! Ew! And I fell in love with it. I went down an insane rabbit hole of reading manga I liked and manga I really hated. Manga I fell in love with, manga that broke me for extended periods of time, and manga I think are the greatest pieces of fiction and stories ever conceived from the minds of humans. I am a Berserk fan now. Have I mentioned I'm a Berserk fan now? Because I'm a Berserk fan. My Berserk boner aside, there were a ton of really amazing manga that I read last year that took away the time that I usually spend watching anime to avoid life, and I'd like to share these manga with you. Feel free to tell me what some of your favorite manga were from last year, and I hope you enjoy this video. Earlier in the year, I stumbled across a manga by the name of Tougen Anki, and for about 2 months I avoided reading this manga because I felt like it wasn't worth devoting my time to. Little did I know that I was very wrong. Tougen Anki follows the story of Shiki, an arrogant delinquent who was saved as a baby by his adoptive father. Saving Shiki resulted in his father having to quit his job in order to focus on raising and protecting Shiki, who ended growing up to be a dickhead. You see, unbeknownst to Shiki, he actually isn't human. He's part of a race called Oni, who have the ability to control their blood and shape it into different forms or enter into berserk-like stages that turn them into literal monsters. And after his dad gets killed in the first chapter, he awakens these Oni powers, and the story turns into a revenge story with Shiki setting out to kill the man who killed his dad and the organization that is trying to literally genocide the entire Oni race. Tougen Anki doesn't really stray far from the typical shonen formula. Often at times you could even compare it to Blue Exorcist or Jujutsu Kaisen. There are a ton of really interesting and lovable side characters. Shiki is a good protagonist. There's a Dami Mommy in the main cast. Mudano is cooler than Gojo. You can fight me if you disagree. And some of the fight scenes in this manga are cool as fuck. You can really feel the speed at which the battles are going at in each fight in the panels, like this one, and this one, and this one. This manga is really good, and I haven't even spoken about how the villain's power system in this world is probably cooler than most power systems in other shonen series. If you enjoy shonen series like Jujutsu Kaisen and Black Clover, then I think you'll really enjoy Tougen Anki. And did I mention that there's a Dami Mommy? Alright, for this next section, I'm gonna start off with a question. Have you ever read a romance manga and thought to yourself, wow, this is really beautiful, but I wish Pennywise was the main love interest? Well, if you have thought that, 1, I'd like you to seek help, and 2, this manga is for you. Even if you slit my mouth or... yeah, I am not pronouncing this. Is a romance horror manga that follows Koichi Sano and Miroku and the bet they have in the story. If Miroku can manage to scare Koichi anytime within the year, then their engagement will be called off. But if she can't, then their engagement stays the same. And you probably have been wondering from the panels I've shown you, what the f is wrong with her mouth? Well, for those of you who don't know, Miroku is known as the... just give me a second. Coochie. I can't say it. If you don't know anything about Japanese urban legends and folklore, then let me educate you. The is a beautiful, pale-skinned, malevolent spirit with long black hair and has a scar on her mouth. She kills people by asking them the question, am I beautiful? And if they answer yes, she opens her mouth and and she shows them her scars. She asks the same question again, and if they answer no, she kills them. If they lie, they receive the same scar. Japanese folklore and urban legends is one of the most interesting thing about this manga because you see these different yokai and spirits all the while following the romance between the main leads of the story. The manga can be funny, beautiful, sad, downright depressing at times, and frightening. It's not on the level of Junji Ito's work because it's a romance manga, but when this manga goes full horror, you will feel some sense of dread. This manga was one of my first romance manga to read, and the added element of horror made it so much more enjoyable. Give it a read, you won't regret it. Also, there's another Dami Mommy. A lot of you might already know this one because it actually got an adaptation last year. For those of you who don't like Isekai, I apologize because there's another Isekai on this list, so this manga might not really sound appealing, but if you don't care about that type of stuff, then you might enjoy this one. Trapped in a Dating Sim, or DS because I am not gonna keep saying this long ass name, is about, well, it's pretty much in the name of the manga. But one thing this manga manages to do really well is subvert your expectations. In most isekai, you get the stereotypical hero gets transported into a magic world and has to defeat the demon lord. Main character manages to gain a harem of girls who are all in love with him and the people love him. Woohoo! Let's all celebrate, guys! He's insanely overpowered, and this has been Control-C, Control-V'd over 1,000 isekais. But DS doesn't do this. Aside from having an insanely hilarious dickhead of a main character, the manga is more of a political based story rather than being a fantasy sci-fi driven show. Because of the hierarchy rules in this game, only the women are able to choose their partners. That, coupled with the fact that the main character's presence basically keeps disrupting the stability of the kingdom he lives in, plus the fact that the kingdom is always teetering on the brink of war with the neighboring kingdoms, makes this manga an extremely interesting read. This manga is really good. If you still want the romance aspect of the manga, then you won't be disappointed. The two main love interests are actually really good, and there's this one panel with one of the love interests, Olivia, where she finally confesses her feelings, and it's so beautiful. Just look at this. Read the manga, watch the anime, you won't regret it, and since I'm already on Isekai, let's keep the ball rolling with another one. Hey, do you like Berserk? Do you like Berserk and Isekai? Cause if you do, this manga might be for you. I am lying, nothing will ever come close to Berserk, especially not a isekai. Berserk is a master. Game of Familia Senki is an isekai that follows a family that gets summoned into a not so pleasant isekai world. Instead of the usual rainbow and sunshine isekai you would expect your titular main character to be in, this manga says that here's a world where parasitic monsters roam the landscape that rape women and kill men because it's their animalistic nature. Here's a race of lizard barbarians who value strength above everything else. You think the elves are actually a kind-hearted, sweet race of tree-hugging assholes? While the heretic blood orgies and violent murders of their own people would kindly disagree with you. Describing the feelings I have for this manga would probably require its own video because it's one of the best isekai I've read by a mile. There's literally a panel in this manga where the main character pulls a Madara Uchiha and literally drops a meteor on an entire army. The main character literally tricks an entire royal family into killing each other and ends up turning the king into his personal servant. This man plays 5D chess with an entire family and actually manages to pull it off. The main character is very similar to the main character in The Eminence in Shadow because he doesn't want to actually be in the spotlight but would rather help his family achieve fame and status. This manga, outside of the vile subjects it goes into, like Yeah, no. It's a really beautiful manga in certain moments. It's about the length someone who loves their family is willing to go to in order to protect them. It shows you that some isekai worlds aren't happy places to live in, the depravity of people when they feel like they have to live up to other people's expectations, the struggles that come with realizing one's own weakness. This manga is really great if you're looking for a really interesting isekai to read. Then read this, you'll enjoy it. Dystopian sci-fi is a genre I never thought I would fall in love with until I read Rebuild World. The manga follows a poor young kid by the name of Akira who lives in a dystopian future. From the moment we see Akira, we are shown that he comes from a really terrible life. An orphan kid who had to become a hunter in order to make ends meet, and even while being a hunter, he had to deal with other hunters' constant bullying because they looked down on him because he was poor and weak. It isn't until he meets this rogue VI by the name of Alpha that his life starts to change. Alpha helps him become a better hunter, and through that we also start to see that she's not as kind as she appears. Alpha, for all her charm, is just using Akira to accomplish her own goal, and while she observes him, she comes to learn that Akira isn't some sweet innocent saint boy just trying to survive, but he's someone probably more sinister underneath his innocent face. This manga is honestly the reason I decided to play Cyberpunk 2077. The world building in this is so cool. Aside from the vast barren hellscapes in this manga, it manages to make me fearful for the main character. Every time Akira leaves the city he's in, he increases his chances of dying by 90%. Alpha may be the voice in his head giving him direction, but she's just that, a voice. You can really tell that not only Akira but all the hunters in this manga can't afford to make a mistake when they're out on the field, because one mistake, one slip up could result in their lives being snuffed out. The art in this manga, aside from being gorgeous as makes you feel every emotion the author wants you to feel. It makes you hear sounds you can't hear. You feel the destruction from an explosion on the panel. There's even a motherfucking Metro Boomin reference in this manga. If that hasn't convinced you to read this manga, I don't know what will. This is the best manga on this list, and I tried my hardest not to spoil anything. Read this manga. Every chapter feels like you're watching a movie, and I can guarantee you won't regret it. Initially, I wanted to end this video by talking about Shonen no Abyss, but I honestly felt like that would have ended the video on the most depressing note possible, so instead of doing that, I wanted to talk about the manga that touched my heart the most last year. But before we do that, there's something I want to talk about. A Silent Voice is the first anime movie I watched that showed me the struggles of what people with disabilities go through. This movie moved me in a way I don't think any other movie could. For the longest time, I'd been oblivious to the subject of disabilities, and then I watched this movie and it showed me what it's really like. You're probably wondering why I'm mentioning A Silent Voice. Well, Yankee and the White Cane Girl touched me in a similar way. This is a shoujo romance manga about a blind girl named Yukiko and her delinquent boyfriend Kurakawa, and the challenges they face being a couple. And by no means are these challenges simple, but the manga is still a romance and a slice of life after all. It will try and be wholesome as much as possible. But one of the most beautiful things about this manga is how it asks the question what it means to be normal, what it means to be human, and the differences between someone who's considered normal for not having a disability and someone who does have a disability. The manga also has one of the sweetest reveals in terms of a character coming out that I've ever seen in media. There's just something so beautiful about seeing how these characters interact with one another, their inner thoughts because of how they view themselves and they view others because of their differences, the insecurities they have, especially Yukiko's sister and her character arc in the story. The art may not be the most gorgeous thing on this list, but it doesn't need to be to tell a beautiful story. This manga has very short chapters, so you could read it in about a day or two, and if you're someone who enjoys shoujo romance or slice of life, you'll probably enjoy this a lot, and it'll probably touch you in a similar way. Read this manga.